What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are basically going to continue our coverage over the Trial of X era of X-Men comics, where we basically pick up with X-Force number 21 and number 22. Now, with that being said, this is our first time actually jumping back over to X-Force after the Hellfire Gala event. And remember, the Hellfire Gala event was a huge thing where basically you had the mutant race show off what they were able to accomplish in a short period of time of being a nation and what they have planned for the world and other planets across the universe down the road. Now, with that being said, though, when it comes to X-Force, they're really more your Black Ops team. Basically meaning that if COPPA has something going on that's really dangerous and somebody might needs to die, you send in the X-Force team. Now, in the X-Force series, we basically have this organization known as Xeno, who has been trying to basically get rid of the mutant race, like most other evil organizations out there when they're trying to fight against the X-Men. Now, when it comes to Xeno, though, Xeno has done a lot of different things to kind of hopefully help them be able to reach that goal. Now, with that being said, though, in today's storyline, they're going to work with the new ManThing. Yes, ManThing. But this one's called Manslaughter. And they're going to use him to hopefully create something new that could basically help them get rid of the X-Men and the mutant race. But getting into today's video, we actually pick up in Washington, D.C. Now, the reason why, because right now, one of the facilities in Washington, D.C. has a certain kind of problem. And that problem is that one of their facility buildings just broke open. And that building was holding chemical waste. And of course, with Washington, D.C. being on the coast, a lot of that chemical waste is going into the ocean, and that is a huge problem because if that chemical waste travels through the ocean, sooner or later it could get to COPPA. And remember, COPPA is a living island, and so for Sage, she's calling in the X-Force team because if that waste gets to COPPA, it could basically make COPPA sick. Now, while that chemical waste is traveling through the ocean, it is also affecting the sea life in the ocean and basically making them evolve into, well, whatever they can evolve into. And so with the sea life basically being affected by this chemical waste and kind of evolving into more crazy wild animals, you do have some whales begin the process of trying to eat people who are just near the shore. That's how crazy this chemical waste is doing to the sea life animals. It changed their behaviors completely and say, hey, you know what? They want to eat people or eat anything in their path, even though that means if they leave the ocean, they don't care if they die or not, as long as they destroy what they see in their path. And so you do have this whale begin the process of trying to eat a grandmother and her granddaughter as they walk the beach. Now, right when they're about to be eaten, that is the moment they are saved by what you would think is ManThing, but it's actually Manslaughter. Now, Manslaughter is a new character that was introduced back in the Weapon Plus series that came out back in 2020. And basically, he found some chemicals, or he was forced to take a chemical that turned him into a ManThing, except he does not call himself ManThing. He calls himself Manslaughter. Either way, he was nearby and he was actually able to save the grandmother and her grandchild from being eaten by this whale. Now, getting back over to the X-Force team, right now, they're also nearby, but right now they're trying to use Forge tech as a way to kind of stop the chemical waste from traveling in the ocean. And remember, when it comes to Forge, his mutant ability basically makes him an Iron Man. Like, he's able to work on different kinds of technology and actually be able to understand it and actually kind of use that technology to make other kinds of weapons that could help him or the X-Men out down the road. And so right now you have X-Force using Forge tech to kind of help deal with the chemical waste that is traveling through the ocean. But while they are doing that though, they do see that a fisherman is about to be attacked by more sea life that was affected by the chemical waste. And of course, these creatures just want to eat anything in their path. But while this old man or fisherman is about to be eaten, he is also saved by manslaughter. Now, for Wolverine, he's kind of thinking, oh my God, this old man's being attacked by manslaughter, because Wolverine has never met manslaughter at this point in Marvel's timeline. And so you have Wolverine go out of his way to attack manslaughter because he thinks that manslaughter is trying to kill the fisherman, but not realizing that the fisherman was just saved by manslaughter. Either way, though, you do have manslaughter being able to get rid of Wolverine, but just barely. And you have Forge kind of realize that manslaughter does look very familiar in a lot of different aspects, but at the same time, he is different. And that right there is actually very important, because it's Forge saying, yes, manslaughter may look like ManThing, another Marvel character, but he's not ManThing. He's something else. And that right there is the big question. Now, back in the present day, you basically do have Sage and Beast working over the sample that Forge was able to get of manslaughter, only because manslaughter basically left a sample on Wolverine's face. Now, once Forge was able to get that sample and hand over to Sage and Beast, in the present day, Dr. Reyes was able to tell Sage, hey, listen, that sample you got from us or for us, it's basically telling us that there is another ManThing out in the world. You have manslaughter and you have ManThing. And for Beast, he's kind of like, that's very interesting. But then you have Sage say, well, actually, there's more than 2 of them out there now. There are many of them. And that right there is very scary, because now you're saying that there are other ManThings out there in the world. And the problem is, though, are those other ManThings good or bad? And that is the moment where we actually pick up with a character known as Walter Whitmire. Now, Walter Whitmire is going to be one of the different characters that we're going to meet here in this storyline right now. And basically what happened was Walter Whitmire, he was at the financial summit, and he is the CEO of a big corporation. But basically at last night, he had to remove himself from the dinner because he did not feel good at all. Except when he wakes up, he sees green slime all over his face. And then he sees a camera was pointed to him and basically has been recording him the entire time. And when he realized that something is going on, when he looks over to his left, he does see a dead body in the bed with him. And of course, it seems like he was the one who had killed this person. But then you have Mr. Whitmire, get a phone call from somebody who basically tells him, you need to cut all ties with Xavier's business. Basically meaning that Whitmire does have some financial or some business connections with Charles Xavier. And whoever basically set up Whitmire, they're telling him you need to cut all ties with Charles Xavier right now. If you don't, this tape will get out and basically show what you actually did to that boy who's dead in your bed. But then we jump over to a character known as Marcia Culpepper. Now, basically, Culpepper was a lawmaker for DC for years and years and years. And her and Senator Raleigh were very loud advocates for the medical advances that were brought by the treaty with COPPA. Here comes the big thing, though. They were going out for lunch. Out of nowhere, she basically shot and killed him. And of course, when she did that, it was out in the open. And so you had a bunch of police officers grab her and pin her down. Here's the problem, though. She does not remember even having a gun. She has no idea where the gun came from. But on top of that, when the police are pinning her down, you see more green slime coming out of her mouth. Jump back over to Beast and Sage. You do have Sage basically tell us that what they are seeing with these different people who are spitting up green slime but being involved in different kinds of crimes, well, they're basically kind of turning into man-things across the world, but they're also being controlled. Now, the reason why they're able to detect this is because the way they're being controlled is very similar to what Beast did a while back. And not really a while back, really the last storyline. Because remember, Beast used his own version of a virus to basically control a country, to make sure that country falls in line with the alliance of COPPA. But with that being said, because that virus is very similar to this new virus that is turning people into man-things, it's Beast saying, okay, we need to go find the source of this or find somebody who could basically help figure out what in the world is going on. Why are we seeing a whole lot more man-things popping up? Now, you do have Beast and Sage basically sent in the XForce team to this very Pacific Woods area. And of course, the reason why, because manslaughter is there. And so you do have the X-Force team go to that area to basically confront manslaughter. Now, when they go confront manslaughter, you do have Wolverine try to reason with the creature. And the reason why, because Wolverine kind of knows what the creature is going through by saying that because the creature is deformed and very scared to interact with the public, it hides out in the woods to be left alone. But also because manslaughter is going through a lot of pain from his past life before he became manslaughter. And so you have Wolverine kind of reasoning with the character because it's Wolverine realizing what the character is actually going through. But after a few more pages of X-Force trying to capture the creature, unfortunately, they're unable to actually get control of the creature. But then you have the creature come back because it remembered what Wolverine was saying and realized that maybe Wolverine understands what it's going through. And so you do have manslaughter come back to Wolverine and say, I can't go back. I can't go back to that location because I know what you're talking about. I know what's happening right now, but I can't go back to the location at all. And when you have Wolverine kind of wondering what manslaughter is talking about, you basically have manslaughter say, I can't go back to Weapon Plus. Now, Weapon Plus is basically the origin of Captain America and also Wolverine. And what I mean by that is basically you had this organization known as Weapon Plus, and they had different projects going on for different kinds of things. So Weapon 1 was basically Captain America. Weapon X is Wolverine. Of course, X means 10 in numeral numbers. But you also had other projects between Steve Rogers and Wolverine, and even some after Wolverine. Like, for example, Nuke. Frank Simpson was also one of the many Weapon Plus program projects. On top of that, though, I want to say Emma Frost was too when it came to the Stepford Cuckoos because they're basically clones of Emma Frost. But you did have a lot of different weapons or different projects made under Weapon Plus, and they all had a certain kind of number. Now, when it comes to manslaughter, his real name is Jackson Strode, and basically he is Weapon 4, meaning that he was the fourth project in their list of projects. 3 after Captain America. Now, what they did with this project was trying to recreate ManThing, because basically, thanks to a certain kind of serum, it made the original ManThing into ManThing. And so what they did with Jackson was they gave him the same serum, and with him having the same serum, he basically turned into another ManThing. And so that is where he actually comes from. And so with that being said, that means if other man-things are popping up left and right across the world right now, but they're being controlled, that means that Weapon Plus is possibly working with Xeno right now, and they have a way to reproduce more man-things across the world. Now, that is the moment where we actually jump into XForce number 22. Now, when we do, we basically pick up with a character known as Dr. Bloodroot. Now, Dr. Bloodroot is going to be somewhat important for this storyline right here. Now, with that being said, though, basically right now, we actually pick up with him at the grave of his wife. And of course, it's him missing his wife, but that is the moment he's met by the leader of Xeno. And of course, it's the guy with the peacock tattoo. Now, we have no idea who this guy is just yet, but we do know that basically he is the leader of Xeno, but on top of that, he has a peacock tattoo. Either way, though, you do have basically the guy with the peacock tattoo coming to Dr. Bloodroot to recruit him to help him take down the mutant race. Because we come to find out what happened to the wife of Dr. Bloodroot, that technically she had died by the hands of the medicine of COPPA. Now, it wasn't like she had a bad reaction to it. It was more of that she got addicted to it. And so it is the leader of Xeno trying to use that as a way to recruit Dr. Bloodroot by saying that mutants gave us medicine, saying that it's supposed to help us. But in reality, it was a way for them to get us addicted to their medicine, to make us be more relying on them for more things down the road. You should join me to help me bring them down. And so you do have basically Dr. Bloodroot join Xeno's side. Now, getting over to Beast and Sage, you do have Beast and Sage basically tell us how those characters we saw earlier were infected by the serum that turns people into manslaughter characters, or ManThings. And basically what happened was they were out there doing their daily things in their daily lives, you know, eating food, drinking coffee, writing tickets, whatever. But basically Xeno had a way to put the serum in different things as a way to make sure it gets into their body. So like put it in their drinks, put it in their foods, or shooting them with some kind of needle that injects into your body to basically give you the ManThing virus. Now, with that being said, though, you do have Beast and Sage realize that every single person that was infected by the ManThing serum, those were just different samples that came from manslaughter. So basically meaning that Weapon Plus, Dr. Bloodroot, Xeno, whoever has some samples of manslaughter and was able to reproduce those samples into a virus that they can basically control. Now for Beast and Sage, it's kind of like, how can they control those people but not manslaughter? But then you have Beast realize that manslaughter does have the ability to kind of send smaller versions of himself and be able to actually control those smaller versions of himself. And so if Xeno was able to take his samples and reproduce them in a way where they can affect other people, but they can control those other people, it now makes sense because manslaughter has the ability to do the same thing if he wanted to. Then we actually pick up with the Order of X. Now, the Order of X is basically a cult that worship mutants. That's really it. But either way, though, right now, you do have the Order of X at one of the Cocoan gates, just doing their usual thing and praising mutants like mutants are their gods. But that is the moment they are confronted by Dr. Bloodroot. Now, at first, you do have these members of the Order of the X believe that Dr. Bloodroot is basically a mutant, and so they're wondering if they should praise him like he is a mutant. But then you have Dr. Bloodroot tell them, no, I am not a mutant. I'm far from it. And he shows that he also has been infected by the manslaughter virus, his own version of it. But of course, he does have somewhat control over the virus in his body. But then he was able to spread the virus into the members of the Order of the X to basically put them under his control. And now their goal is to attack COPPA. And so is Xeno continuing their plan to try to get rid of the mutant race. Now, getting back over to XForce, you do have XForce basically asking Manslaughter to work with COPPA. And the reason why, because with the abilities of COPPA and Manslaughter, they'll be able to connect with all plant life around the world. Now, the reason why they're doing that is because it will give them the ability to hopefully locate the source of this new problem. And of course, the source right now is to find Dr. Bloodroot. And so while you have the two characters working together, they're able to realize, okay, we now know who's the main problem right now. It's this character over here known as Dr. Bloodroot. Let's go find him and basically stop him. Now remember, earlier we saw Dr. Bloodroot being able to take over people who were part of the Order of the X and basically gave them the ability to walk through the Krakoan gates. And when they did that, of course, they did arrive on Krakoa and began to attack different areas of Krakoa. Now the reason why Dr. Bloodroot is doing all of this, because remember, his wife died by the hands of the medicine that came from Krakoa. And so he basically blames mutants for the medicine killing his wife, even though it was more of her getting addicted to the medicine. Now that is the moment where we actually jump over to XForce and also jump over to Manslaughter, who are right now confronting Dr. Bloodroot, because of course he's back at the grave of his wife and telling his dead wife that he was able to get revenge for her by sending in a small army to basically attack the mutant race. Now with that being said though, you do have XForce and Manslaughter coming to Dr. Bloodroot wanting to actually talk to him and tell him the true reasoning behind the death of his wife. Now at first, Dr. Bloodroot is not trying to listen. And the reason why, because one, he hates mutants, but two, he knows about Manslaughter. And the reason why, because before Jackson had turned into Manslaughter, Jackson was going around breaking into different laboratories to see what they were working on and see if what they were working on was actually dangerous. And of course, Jackson broke into Dr. Bloodroot's lab, which then led to him being captured and being part of the Weapon Plus program, turning him into Manslaughter. Now, with that being said, though, you do have Manslaughter say, no, I'm not here because what you did to me or why you hate mutants. I came here to tell you the real reasoning behind the death of your wife. Your wife did not die just because of medicine she got from Krakoa. She basically met with a drug dealer. Because your wife did get addicted, she wanted more and more medicine. But what really did kind of push her addiction for this medicine was a certain kind of drug dealer who gave her a bad version of Krakoan's medicine, which of course basically meant that when she took that bad version of that medicine, she got addicted to it even more and she wanted more. But that drug dealer kept giving her more, which of course led to her death. Oh, by the way, her drug dealer was the man with the peacock tattoo, the leader of Xeno, the guy who just had made you help him do even more bad things for the Earth, basically killed your wife, because he knew if he did that, he had a way to recruit you. Now, once you have Dr. Bloodroot actually hear that, you do have Manslaughter kind of being able to defeat Dr. Bloodroot with the help of XForce, and we're left to believe that basically Dr. Bloodroot is dead because he did fall in the grave of his dead wife and his plant life powers went away, but then left a skeleton body. And so we're left to believe that he's actually dead, but we all know that boy ain't dead yet. He'll probably come back down the road. Now, the last page really confirms the idea that Dr. Bloodroot is most likely not dead, because as you have Wolverine saying goodbye to Manslaughter by giving Manslaughter a ride back home to his forest, you do have Manslaughter say because he was a plant-like, usually plants always come back in some kind of way. And so meaning that Dr. Bloodroot will most likely come back in some kind of way. Either way, you do have Wolverine and Manslaughter say goodbye to one another, but we can see right here that these two characters now have a bond with one another because they both know what it's like to go through the Weapon Plus program. But with that being said, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.